now that we have talked about sounds are going to be formed by basic units of spoken language, which are phonemes, just like written language has the alphabets, the written alphabets. And then we talked about this voicing, how it closes and opens, and because of that you will get this periodic repetition of the signal, right? So this is a typical waveform of one sentence that somebody has spoken, right? So this is in the time domain, right? So this is the first 10, I think every 100 milliseconds is one row. So there's 100 milliseconds here, then next 100 milliseconds here, next 100 milliseconds here, and so on. Okay. Now, from whatever you have learned, you should start now anticipating, whether by just looking at the signal, whether you can make some kind of, get some idea what is happening, right? So, for example, if you look at the last row, there is a periodic repetition, right? So, where do we know, what do we know, when does this periodic repetition happen? We know that's because of the opening and the closing. So, we expect this last row is mostly because of some voiced sound, okay? So, quickly I can easily find out something just by looking at the signal in the time domain itself, right? Then if I look at this initial part, there is hardly any signal amplitude. So, if I have recorded in a quiet room, we assume that there is no noise, ambient or environment noise. So, that is the silence portion. Then when I do sounds like very little sound, very low volume, and no vibration, right? So therefore, these are called unvoiced, right? They are not voiced, right? And so you can see initially after the silence, there is small vibrations, small amplitude variations. That is because I might be producing some unvoiced sound like that, okay? But when I produce a voiced kind of sound like ba, ga, e, there you can see that the amplitude automatically becomes bigger, right? And there is periodic repetition, okay? And if you look at specifically vowels like a, e, u, when I say bat, right, b is very short, okay? Most vowels when we speak are of longer duration. Bat, a, bat, bat, b, a. So b is very short, a is long, and t is very short. Okay, so just by looking at the signal itself, you can extract a lot of information, and that's why speech is much more excuse me, informative compared to much more informative compared to text, right? For example, just by looking at text, you cannot even find out the gender, right? It's more difficult to find out what the gender of the person is. But in speech, it's very easy to find out the gender, right? But just by looking at the signal, I can tell you pretty much what the gender of the person is. How can I do that? That's what I'm trying to ask here, right? What did I say before, right? When I produce voiced sounds, right, their glottis opens and closes, right? But I told you also it depends on the physiology, right? Generally, men are taller, women are short, lighter and shorter, and children are very small and very light, right? And that determines your opening and closing, the rapidity with which you open and close, right? So, on an average, remember, most of our, real day things are probabilistic. We will make some errors. The question is how few errors we will make, right? So, if you look at it on an average, right, you can see that the men we know have a periodicity of about 100 hertz. That is, every 10 milliseconds the opening and closing happens, okay? But women, it's around 240 to 250 hertz, okay? So, every 4 milliseconds they will be creating the thing, opening and closing. And children are about 400 hertz, right? So, just by looking at the spacing between this itself, I can find out pretty reliably whether the person who's speaking is a man or a woman or a child, okay? On an average, you will get most of the time 98-99% accurate results, okay? So, that's a speech is much more informative compared to text. You can even find out the emotion of a person. If I'm angry, I speak in a different way. If I'm sad, I speak in a different way. If I'm happy, I speak in a different way. Even though I might say the same thing. Oh, you're going to Bangalore. So it's a sad way of saying, Oh, you're going to Bangalore, you're excited, and you're, so you can create emotions, you actually convey emotions, right, from the way you speak, right? When you're angry, you say something, right, differently, the same words, right? Emotion is captured. Your health itself, I mean, if you're tired, you speak in a different way, right? So there are many things that spoken language, I mean, apart from the communication aspects, it's also having a lot of other information that is useful for many different things, right? So for example, if you want to do targeted advertising, right? So if they're making you wait for a customer service and they figure out you're a woman, they may target you in a different way, right? Advertising. If you're a man, they may target you in a different way. In fact, even age, to some extent, we can sort of broadly say, at least they are young, the the 20, less than 25 kind of thing versus above 50, our voice do change with age, right? So there are lots of interesting things we can do just by using the speech signal. Okay. So, as I said, we are going to do, we can use just the time domain signal to identify whether it's a man or a woman or a child. Many things we can do. Okay. So, we'll talk about many of these applications later. Okay. So, the other aspect that I talked about at the beginning of the class, and that was that I reviewed it, that this idea of systems, right? It takes an input signal and gives you an output signal, right? And we normally like linear and time invariant systems. Why do we like that? Because for linear time invariant systems, if I know the impulse response, the response to a single one sequence called the impulse sequence, then you give me any arbitrary input x of n, then the output y of n is the convolution of x of n with the impulse response. So I can mathematically give you the output. You don't have to physically feed it through the system. That is the power of linear time invariant systems. Okay. In nature, things change. So we are not actually time invariant. We are time varying. But what we assume is over a short period of time, that's where the concept of quasi-stationarity comes. I assume that nothing changes, but this is almost like a time invariant system. For about 20 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, I assume the system does not undergo big changes. So I can approximate. So that's what engineering is all about, right? That we make some approximations, we make some assumptions. As long as these assumptions are realistic, they do not, are very different from the real world, these things work very well. Okay, and that's one of the ideas that we will always talk about in the speech course, the idea of what is called a system, where the mouth is acting like a system. The mouth is going to act like a linear time invariant system, and depending on the mouth configuration, the parameters of the filter changes, right? And therefore different frequency responses will come out. Okay, and the input to that system is our excitation. I can just have noise, like when I say I'm just producing, lungs produce, there's no glottis vibration. Sometimes I am producing the glottis vibrations, e, u. So the signal at the input signal has broadly two categories, right? And that's what is indicated, this periodic opening and closing. So this is idealized by this impulse train, or we assume it is like a noise, right? So there are two broad categories of input that you get, the x of n. This vocal tract, which is the mouth, acts like a filter. Okay, and this is very popular model that's always used in speech. And depending on the mouth configuration, over a short period of time, we assume the mouth remains in a almost stationary. And even though it looks like I've said and quite fast, if you take snapshots at more than 120 or 200 frames per second or something, you can see that over a period of time they are almost stationary, and 3 or 4 successive these photos will be almost similar, right? So during that period it's almost like stationary, nothing has changed in the configuration of the mouth, and therefore we talk about this mouth in each of these fixed positions as producing one sound, right? And this is basically because of the configuration of the mouth, which basically has its own frequency response. So if you look at the frequency response of the mouth, for different sounds, you will get different, pitch, different resonant frequencies, which you call as phonemes. Okay, so these are pitch. Pitch is basically, as I said, the opening and closing. That's how musicians, vary their, produce a higher pitch and a lower pitch. That is by controlling this guy, right? and the sound of the particular sound that you want to produce, ah or e or oo, depends on the mouth. So each of these sounds, if you recall, I have shown that each sound has a different you know resonant frequencies, and therefore that is what we call as a formants, and therefore when we have the mouth part of it, it will have its own frequency response. The frequency of this opening and closing in the frequency domain is this impulse train. So if you remember the linear time unit system, in the time domain, if I take an input x of n, pass through a filter h of n and get an output y of n, the y of n is the convolution of x of n with h of n, right? But I also made a very important statement at the beginning of the class that if I do a Fourier transform, that is coming into the Fourier domain, into the frequency domain, where we analyze in terms of frequencies, this convolution operation becomes a multiplication operation, right? And therefore, it's just a simple multiplication of two frequency domain signals. So, so if you look at the Fourier transform of a speech signal, right, for stationary part or e or oo, right, only one sound I am producing, then the input here will be glottis, which will be this impulse train. The mouth is configured to produce like father, or heed, like in heed, right. This one will be constant. So these two get multiplied, and the Fourier transform of the speech signal that comes out will be the multiplication. So you can see the envelope, right, which is basically the the envelope, which is basically the mouth, and these sharp spikes are what is called the pitch harmonics, which is the opening and closing of the glottis. In the frequency domain, it will be another impulse train, right. So that is the basic idea of how we produce speech, right. So this is called a terminal analog model or a source filter model. So the way we think of how speech is produced is there is something that drives here, noise or periodic opening and closing. The mouth configures in different positions, and depending on the position, you get different formants or different resonant frequencies, and each resonant frequency is characteristic of a particular sound, right. So that is the idea between these things, okay. And even in the frequency domain, these are the pitch opening and closing. So that is also quite a good indication of gender. If you remember, the opening and closing in the time domain, because of the mass, is takes longer time to open and close for man, right. Therefore, the frequency is smaller, right. It's inverse, right. So if the spikes are closer to each other, then we know that there's a man. If the spikes in the frequency domain are further apart, that is a fundamental frequency in its harmonics, they are further apart, then we say that there's women. And if they are very far apart, 400 hertz apart, if it's the frequency domain, if you're looking at it, they will be further apart for children, okay. So now I always keep talking about taking the Fourier transform, right? But we know that the signal keeps changing its frequency content, because when I speak, I'm producing different positions of the mouth. Therefore, the frequency, the resonant frequencies are going to change. Therefore, if I want to analyze each of the sounds separately, I have to look at small portions of the signal, okay. Some windowing of the signal I have to do before computing the transform, right. So that is basically what we call as a windowed Fourier transform, or also known as the short-time Fourier transform, or the STFT. So what does it mean? It means that if I have a signal like this, right, this is a time domain signal, I multiply by some window, right, some smooth window like this maybe. So this is basically zeroing out the signal outside this part and only picks up this portion of the signal, right. So that means only this portion of the signal I am paying attention to, like I am seeing through a window. I cannot see the other part of the signal. Only what I can see through the window is this part. That's why it's called windowing, right. And then the rest of the part is 0. So now it becomes a finite duration signal, right. And then I can talk about its DFT if I'm talking about computers, and we take the transform and do it, right. And then I keep doing it for different parts of the sound, because I know that the sound is going to keep changing, because as I speak, I'm producing different sounds, right. So then, so if this was there, now it will shift, I can shift it a little more to the right. So it will come somewhere here, right? It's moved a little more to the right. Now I am focusing on a different portion of the signal. So the frequency content might have changed during that period. Again, I can look at the Fourier transform. Again, I move the signal to another position at the window and I keep doing it. So I do short time analysis, different portions of the signal. I am looking at it and computing the Fourier transform for each such portion. Okay. So if I take each portions and put it side by side, it's like basically like a matrix, right? And so each column corresponds to one portion or one small local period of time, then the windows move to another local period of time, another local period. So as we move across the columns of the matrix, then we are basically seeing the evolution of the frequency as a function of time, right? So we plot along the y-axis the Fourier transform for a particular signal, let's say localized around 0 seconds. Then I move it by 10 seconds. Again, I get a Fourier representation or the frequency content around the 10 millisecond. Then I move to 20 millisecond. Then I move to 30 milliseconds. So each local information in around 10 milliseconds, around 20 milliseconds is captured and I am going to plot that. Okay. But now it is going to become a 3D plot. Why? There's time, then there's a frequency axis, the magnitude. Actually, it can, if it's complex, there will be 4 dimensions, right? Or two three-dimensional plots, one for the real part and one for imaginary part, or one for magnitude, one for phase, right? But normally, let's say we look only at the magnitude. So the magnitude comes out of the page. The x-axis is the time, the y-axis is the frequency, and the z-axis is the amount or the intensity of the Fourier transform. But if you want to show it in 2D very easily, we use either black intensity in terms of how black it is, or in terms of color, red being high amplitude and green, blue being the low amplitude ones. Okay, so therefore, now there is another idea from Fourier transform which we briefly discussed. That is, when we take a short period of time, that's called a short window. So if I see, if my window, this is called the window, right? So this blue thing is looking locally. I can make this blue thing occupy a smaller portion, make it very narrow, or I can make it very broad. So if I make it very broad, then I'm capturing a longer time duration. So any rapid changes in the time domain signal will not be captured. Why? Because it's taking an entire, like say, 100 milliseconds of information. Something that happened only within 15 and 20 milliseconds cannot be captured. The whole 100 milliseconds is being captured. But if I take a very narrow window between 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, then what happens between 15 and 20 gets easily captured. Okay, so I'll stop here. Yeah.